So now that we've talked about the slope and that increasing and decreasing and those units, let's talk about what we use the slope in. So we use the slope in our equation y equals mx plus b. And that is called the slope-intercept form of the equation. You probably remember that guy from high school where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. We've got all this information here. You can use this as a reference as you're going through and doing your WebAssign and your GCAs and your homeworks and all that good stuff. We've got a problem over here on the next page. Here we've got this equation and it asks us to solve for y, write it in slope-intercept form. So I want to get y by itself. I'm just going to rewrite the problem down here. I want to get y by itself, so I'm going to move that term with x over to the other side. Be careful to keep that negative. The order here doesn't matter, so you could have 4 minus 12x, or you can have the negative 12x plus 4. Just make sure there's a negative in front of the 12, and that 2 is also negative with the y. Still trying to get y by itself, so I'm going to divide by negative 2. When I do that, oh, my pen stopped working. Let me just get that back going. Sorry, that's a little fix that I learned for the pen there. So when I divide by negative 2, remember from our first day of class, we talked about common mistakes people make. Both terms have to be divided by that negative 2. 12 divided by negative 2 is 6, and 4 divided by negative 2 is negative 2. So y equals 6x minus 2. Thinking about our y equals mx plus b, where m's the slope and b is the y-intercept, my slope is the number in front of x. So the slope is 6. It's not 6x. The slope is just the number. So it's that number in front of the variable, so 6. And the y-intercept is negative 2. Now WebAssign's going to want us to write that as a point. If you just wrote negative 2 in your paper, I would totally give you credit, but WebAssign's going to want it a point. Thinking about graphing these guys, the y-intercept has to touch the y-axis, it's on the y-axis, so that is the point 0, negative 2. 0 is always in the x spot for a y-intercept because we're not moving left or right, we're just on that y-axis, not going anywhere on the x-axis. So 0 for x, and then a number for the y-intercept. Speaking of the graphs, let's look at some graphs on this next page here. So there's not a ton of graphs that we have to do. There is one on WebAssign, and I'll actually show you guys in class on Friday how to do that graph on WebAssign to make sure, because I know it can be a little tricky. So if you're working on that WebAssign 1, you're having trouble with the graphing, I'll show you how to work that in class on Friday. But graphing these by hand, we'll go ahead and do. I'm going to start up here with A. I'm going to start with the y-intercept. This is going to be true on line 2. I'm going to start with the y-intercept. So my y-intercept is at 4. And my slope is 0. We're going to talk about these special lines later on, again in our notes packet. But the slope of 0 is when we have a flat horizontal line. So I get this line right here. On the rest of these, you've got some choices. Not everybody's graph is going to look the same. I'm just going to go over here to C. The y-intercept is negative. Choose any negative number that you want. Any negative number. And the slope is 2. Some people might remember that that's the same thing as 2 over 1. So I would go up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1. And I can connect those. Again, you could have chosen any negative number for y. The slope was, again, that 2 over 1. 2 is the same thing as 2 over 1. And remember, in slopes that we were doing in the last video, the y's are on top. That's why I go up first and then over. All right, I want you to pause the video and try B and D. So try to finish out this page. You can choose whichever slope you want to as long as it's positive or negative. So go ahead and hit pause and give this a shot. Okay, let's see how you did. A y-intercept of -3 and a positive slope goes up from left to right. We always read graphs left to right, just like we read our words on our page from left to right. So you could have had something like this. As long as your pencil was going up as you moved across, then you were good to go. I'll just draw another one, a different color. You might have made it really steep. Both of those would have been correct answers. For D, we had that same y-intercept, but my graph should be going down. So as we go from left to right, that's one option, or you could have made a shallow one again. So there's 2 options for each one of these. They basically are opposites from each other. One's positive going up, one's negative and going down. And again, I always start from left to right. So this graph, starting on the left, my pencil's going down. That's how I know it's going to be negative.